It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Now we're moving into a new decade. We're moving into the 30s, and we've just called this the breakthrough. Now, in previous shows, we talk about how this could be like the messy middle or the hard time because you have all these things going on. But really, when you think about it from a wealth building standpoint, this is where your dollars start to get a little bit of steam behind them.
Yeah, no doubt. Life is getting more complicated, but it's also a time to have some celebrations because you're starting to get some traction in your career. Yep. You're starting to get some of those adulting side effects, is meaning that you might be getting married, sure. You might have children, you have your first mortgage. House purchase is typically in your early 30s. So these are all some of the things that are coming your way. And that's why we call this the breakthrough. So if we were actually trying to figure out net worth wise, what part of the net worth statement should we focus on in our 30s? The first thing, and this was kind of interesting when we came up with this in show notes, because everybody, when you think net worth, you think, okay, assets minus liabilities equals my net worth. We didn't start there, Bo.
We did not start there.
We actually started with what? Footnotes. Notes that you should put at the bottom of your net worth statement. What do we mean by that?
The reason we think the footnotes are so important is because of exactly what you just said. Maybe in your 30s you're getting married. Maybe in your 30s you're starting to have kids. What we're saying is really now your life isn't just based on you. There are other people that are now depending on you. So you want to make sure that you have all of the appropriate risk mitigation measures in place. You want to make sure that you do have your life insurance in place. You do want to have your wills in place. You don't have those things. Well, they don't normally find themselves on the net worth statement. They're not an asset. They're not a liability. So they tend to be a footnote at the bottom or on the second page.
I think it's interesting. I just saw this on Twitter in the last hour or two, is that there were more cash value life insurance policies than there were than term.
Really?
And so this is something I want to tell my 30-year-olds. There's a good chance that you need those assets. You need the income to be allocated out efficiently because you've got kiddos, you've got a spouse, you're trying to buy the house, plus you're trying to build the savings habit of having army of dollar bills building for the future.
Yep.
You're just trying to prevent, if you got taken out on a Tuesday afternoon, that you don't leave behind a big mess for your family. Term life insurance is actually probably one of the most effective ways to do that. So I make that statement just to understand that you might want to go look at just some simplistic benchmark rules that you see out there in the industry. 10 times your income.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you go look at 10 times your income, go look at 20-year, 30-year term, I think you'll find it's much more affordable because you're basically buying just the cost of the insurance. You're not trying to overpay now so that when you get to be 70 years old, that all those overpayments cover the increased cost of the insurance. We're not worried about that just now. We're just trying to cover the insurable need that you have.
And so obviously life insurance covers the big thing. It covers the financial responsibility. But if something were to happen to both you and your spouse, you want to make sure that you have stuff in place that'll say, what happens to the kids? What happens to the assets? What are my ultimate wishes? That's why estate documents are so important. And unfortunately, it's a weird conversation to have. Okay, if something happens to us, who's going to watch the kids? If you think it's difficult for you to have that conversation while you're here and can speak for yourself, imagine how difficult it's going to be for the rest of your family to try to figure it out. That's why we hate seeing people in the 30s neglect this because it is so, so important. Hopefully you do them, you get them filled out. You never need to use them, but they're in place just in case.
Let's transition to beyond the footnotes. Let's talk about liabilities. We started this, even though it's not the top of your net worth statement, liabilities are still one of a big concern I think you have in your 30s because this is the time you're buying a house.
Sure.
So you want to make sure, because your biggest expenses are like automobiles, houses, but these are also huge financial traps where if you have all of your monthly budget going to those two big purchases, what's left for you to actually save and build your army of dollars? That's why we give you the guidance. Your mortgage plus your housing expenses should really not exceed 25% of your gross income.
That's exactly right.
Now, a lot of people on the coastal communities, you're like 25%, that's laughable. We probably need to spend 35%. I get it. I'm going to give you a little bit of grace on this, but understand if you take 10% here, of that grace, you better be cutting somewhere else so that we can continue to build the savings habit.
Now, notice what we said there. We didn't say, oh, if you have a mortgage in your liability column, your goal should be to pay that mortgage off as quickly as possible. In your 30s, in our opinion, that should not be your goal. Your goal should be to make sure that your mortgage is an appropriate amount and it falls in less than 25% of your gross income.
Other big purchase, cars.
Yep.
We talked about this for 20s, but I'll quickly repeat it again. 23.8, 20% down payment. Don't finance for more than 3 years or 36 months on the amortization. Cannot be more than 8% of your gross income. And here's the other two caveats. You do not want your monthly investments to be less than your monthly car payment. If you got those two backwards, meaning you have like $1,000 a month car payment and only $200 a month going into your Roth IRA, you're doing it all wrong. Make sure that the investments are bigger than the car payment. Also, if you get those luxury brands, you better be treating it same as cash. Essentially, have it paid off within 12 months.
So then we want to move on to the asset side, to the exciting side. Now, in your 20s, we talked about you want to be looking for an emergency fund. You want to be moving towards that. In your 30s, it's a non-negotiable. You have to make sure that you have your liquid cash covered. 3 to 6 months of living expenses in cash. Usually it hangs out right there at the top of your net worth statement. You got to make sure you check that box before you begin building the rest of the asset column.
When we get to investments, it's interesting. In the 20s, I gave a lot of latitude, and I said, look, I want you to be able to, work towards saving 20%, maybe 25%, but it's also aspirational in your 20s. In your 30s, guys, this is the time it's got to happen. You've got to make sure you're getting 20 to 25% of your gross income working for you through your army of dollar bills. It can come from your employer retirement plan and come from your Roth IRA. Just make sure you have investments that are building your army of dollar bills.
The other thing that I think is so beautiful, and it's a magical thing that I think happens for a lot of folks in their 30s, is your net worth statement, if you're doing it right, should look a lot different at 31 than it does at 39. It's almost a tale of two net worth statements. And one of the things that you'll recognize as you're doing your annual net worth statement, you'll start to see the critical mass of your assets grow year over year over year. Well, one of the things your net worth statement might inform you of is, okay, am I at the level now where it makes sense for me to graduate past an automated investing, automated financial planning solution?
Yeah, because we love, 20s, 30s. I love people. This is why it's a great time to be alive and a great time to be a builder of wealth. We have what's called index target retirement funds. All you have to come up with is, how much can I save? When do I need the money? When do I think I'm retiring? What's my financial independence period? If you can come up with those two periods, just go buy an index target retirement fund from somebody like Vanguard, Fidelity Investments. These are incredible opportunities. Those are the leading providers of it. However, you're going to reach a level probably around 400,000, maybe 500,000, somewhere in there, where you're going to say, you know what? I need a little more attention to the asset allocation. I also need to focus on tax diversification, or what's called tax location, meaning I want my fixed income in those tax deferred accounts because I go get taxed at ordinary income. I want my Roth IRA to have the best growth assets whatsoever. And then I want my taxable account not only to have liquidity, but I also want to make sure they have the dividends. They have the long-term capital gains, all the things that have some tax favorability. Focus on that. And then don't forget, tax loss harvesting, as well as capital gain planning, meaning that you could even get into charitable planning, charitable giving. There's all kind of cool things that you could help navigate those large financial decisions with.
Yeah, and if you are making large financial decisions, it's perfectly fine if you're using resources like the Money Guy or other resources out there. But if you do find that the gravity of the decisions you're making is maybe more than you want to bear on your own, it's not a bad time to start thinking about reaching out to a financial advisor, start thinking about working with someone who can help you on that journey. So this is the other thing that I love about the 30s. We said this is kind of that decade where your assets start to catch steam and you actually start to have some momentum behind you, but still your dollars are powerful in your 30s. We said that for a 20-year-old, you only have to save $95 a month to get to $1 million by 65. Well, for a 30-year-old, you only have to save $270 a month. That's still more than the 95, but not a ton when you think about over an entire working career. You could have $1 million saved. And if you're just saving $270 per month, 89% of that $1 million is comprised of growth. It's your army of dollar bills working upon itself to generate wealth for you.
That's the big takeaway. 11% of your $1 million is you. The other 89% is coming from your army of dollars working just as hard, if not even harder than you. Don't blow that opportunity, because you're going to find out the most valuable resource in that equation is the time that these assets had in the market. Not timing the market, as Bo always says, but time in the market.
That's right.
So focus on those. And now this is probably a great point. You're trying to figure out, where do I fit in? What's my spot check? Where should I be? I know, according to Fidelity, they think 30-year-olds should have like 1 times your gross salary saved.
So whatever
up.
you make in a year, they should have 1 times annual gross salary if you're 30. Well, we said let's take it even a step further. Let's talk about someone sort of in their mid-30s, around age 35. And this is what we found. The average median income for someone in their 30s is a touch under $48,000 a year. The average median net worth is right at $45,000. So
Fidelity
it
was spot
aligns
on.
pretty closely. Well, if you want to be an average accumulator of wealth, you want to take your age times your income divided by 10 plus however many years you have until 40. So if you're a 35-year-old, you would divide by 15. You can see that an average accumulator of wealth should have a net worth. This includes all of your investments, all your home equity, all your assets, of a little over $111,000 a year.
But that's not financial mutants.
That's not financial mutants.
Average accumulators of wealth. When we get into the financial mutants column, you can quickly see that income jumps up to $76,000 a year. The net worth for the top 25%, mid-30s, about $172,000, $173,000.
I think what's so remarkable there is if you just look at the average, it's about 1 times annual salary. You can see the folks who tend to be higher income, at least if you want to fall in the top 25% category, they're doing a great job of turning that higher income into wealth. They're not just at 1 times salary, they're at greater than 2 times salary, which is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and think about it, because this is also 35-year-olds. That's why, we celebrate those median Americans, but they're really kind of behind, because this is a 35-year-old is what we base these numbers off of. The prodigious accumulator. Remember, we've talked about that modified millionaire next door formula where you take your age times your income divided by 10 plus how many years are you from 40? Well, in your 30s, it's a lot less. It's less than 10. So you can see still a prodigious accumulator is somebody who has that millionaire next door formula times 2. That number comes in for the financial mutants right around $356,000.
So if you are someone in your mid-30s and you are over that 350 mark, you are doing great. Keep on the path, because those dollars are going to be so powerful as you continue to build towards financial independence.
And if you're behind, use this as your chance. I'm telling you, the 20s and 30s are your opportunities. Get excited, get engaged. You're not behind. You can do this still. You just have to kind of wake it up, let your army of dollar bills start doing the heavy lifting for you.
Yep.